You already know the feeling that in a room full of people, and somehow you find yourself, you are the only one in it. Here's what that feeling is. Neuroscientists can now measure the exact speed at which a lonely brain picks up a rejection cue in a room. It takes 120 milliseconds to do that. That's twice as fast as everyone else. Less than half the time it takes you to blink. You would assume that the brain's fear center going haywire. Scientists have assumed that too, but they were wrong. And the reason why they were wrong is the whole story. Somewhere tonight, a man is standing at a party with 40 people around him, and he is dying faster than the man who is eating dinner alone in his apartment 2 streets over. Nobody at that party could tell you which one he is, but his own brain already knows that. Right now, in a lab, researchers can watch a lonely brain flinch at nothing. Not at danger, at a photograph of a stranger's calm face. The flinch is real. It shows up on a scan. For most of human history, being cut off from the group meant something specific. No one to watch your back while you slept. No one to help carry the kill home. Isolation meant a shorter life, and the body built an alarm to stop that from happening quietly. That alarm still exists. It still fires. The only difference is that it can no longer tell the difference between a saber-toothed cat and a group chat you were not added to. This is the part almost nobody explains correctly. Loneliness was never designed to feel comfortable. It was designed to feel unbearable enough that you would go find people. The discomfort is not a malfunction. It is the alarm working exactly as built. The problem is, the alarm was built for a world with tigers and empty plains. It was never built for a species that could feel surrounded and still register as alone. Somewhere in a lab in Germany, a research team was sure of what they were about to find. Loneliness looks like fear from the outside, so it should live where fear lives. That is, the amygdala, the almond-sized alarm buried in the middle of the brain. So they scanned dozens of chronically lonely people, expecting to catch that alarm running hot, the same way it runs in someone with severe social anxiety. But to everyone's surprise, it wasn't. When they showed lonely brains threatening social situations, the amygdala barely moved. Same size response as everyone else's. The team had built an entire study around confirming a theory, and the data quietly told them the theory was wrong. What they found instead was harder to explain and, it turns out, far more interesting. The lonely brain is not louder, it is faster, and only at one very specific job, catching a rejection signal before anyone else in the room would notice it happened. Show it 100 ordinary faces mixed with one flicker of disinterest, and it finds that flicker before your conscious mind has even finished forming an opinion about the person. Think of it less like a smoke detector wired to scream at everything, and more like a sniper trained on one exact target. Most people's brains are scanning a room for general vibes. A lonely brain has narrowed its entire search algorithm down to one signal, the moment someone starts pulling away. This is why a lonely mind starts reading an ending into silence before there's any evidence of one. A friend takes 2 hours to reply, and the brain doesn't wait for the explanation. It already filed the message under rejection and moved on to bracing for it. The lonely brain isn't paranoid by accident. It has simply become world-class at a job nobody asked it to specialize in. Finding the exit sign in a conversation that hasn't even started leaving yet. And that speed must come from somewhere. Every one of those false alarms, real or not, floods the system with a chemical built for short emergencies. That is cortisol. We will come back to what happens when that chemical stops leaving the building. Cortisol is supposed to be a sprinter, a short burst to get you through the moment, then gone. In a chronically lonely brain, it behaves like it moved in permanently. Here is what happens when it never leaves. It keeps the blood-brain barrier under constant low-grade siege, the wall meant to protect the brain from the rest of the body's chemical mess. Over months, that wall gets thinner. A detection system that never rests doesn't just cost you peace of mind. it starts spending your actual brain tissue to keep running. So the wall around the brain gets thinner and the detector keeps running. But what nobody asks is which part of the brain pays that bill and what it actually buys with that. In a scanner in the UK, researchers looked inside the brains of nearly 40,000 people. They weren't looking for tumors or injuries. They were looking for the shape loneliness leaves behind. They found it in one place more consistently than anywhere else. That is the default network, the part of your brain responsible for remembering who you are, replaying old conversations, and imagining what other people think of you. Here's where the story gets counterintuitive. Everyone assumes loneliness shrinks your brain the same way isolation shrinks a life. That's not what the scan showed. In lonely people, this network wasn't smaller. It was bigger, busier, and far more tightly wired than in anyone else in the study. Picture that network like a house you've lived in your whole life. Loneliness doesn't knock rooms down. It does something closer to letting one room take over the entire floor plan. The room where you replay the thing you said wrong at dinner. The room where you rehearse the conversation you're about to have, and the one you already had, over and over. That room gets bigger, better lit, more visited, until it's most of the house, and the rest of the rooms go quiet from disuse. This is the part that lives in your own head. While that one room keeps expanding, something else is quietly paying the bill. The hippocampus, the structure that stores your memories, gets smaller under the chronic stress hormones flooding a lonely brain. Not significantly smaller, measurably smaller, on a scan with a ruler. Less hippocampus means less room to store what's happening to you. More default network means more room to replay what already happened, or what you're afraid is about to happen. The math only runs one direction. The protein your neurons need to grow new connections drops under chronic stress. Less of it means less repair, less growth, less capacity to build anything new out of what happens to you. And there is a second casualty that nobody expects: the reward system. Dopamine, the chemical that makes connecting with another person feel good in the first place, quietly goes dark. We will come back to what a brain looks like once its own reward system stops rewarding it. Controlling for age, income, and existing illness, several large studies now put chronic loneliness at somewhere around 1.5 to 1.6 times the dementia risk of people who don't report it. A dark reward system doesn't go looking for what it can no longer feel. It withdraws instead. The very network that grew from isolation now pushes you further into it. The brain that isolation built doesn't just make you feel worse. It makes you worse at wanting the one thing that would fix it. In 2010, researchers combined data from 148 separate studies, 300,000 people tracked for an average of 7.5 years, to answer one question: does loneliness kill you? The answer arrived as a number nobody wanted printed on a warning label. Chronic loneliness raises the risk of premature death by roughly the same amount as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Nobody smokes 15 invisible cigarettes and calls it a bad mood. But that is exactly what a lonely brain is doing to the body every day. No smoke, no smell, no warning on the packaging. It raises stroke risk by close to 1/3, heart disease risk by nearly the same margin. Loneliness does not attack the heart directly, but it keeps the body in a permanent, low-grade emergency, and eventually that wears out parts that were never built to run for this long. This is where the alarm, the shrinking, and the bill all meet in the same body. A threat detector that never rests, a memory center that keeps losing rooms, a heart doing overtime for a war that was never real. Here is the detail that should unsettle you more than any number so far. None of this requires an empty room. A study published in 2026, tracking people across their lifespans, found something the isolation researchers did not expect. Simply being alone barely moved the needle on cognitive decline. Feeling alone did nearly all of the damage. whether or not another human being was standing 3 feet away. A man in a marriage can carry this exact alarm. A woman in a house full of children can carry it too. The condition was never measured in square footage. It was measured in a gap, the distance between the connection your brain expects and the connection it is actually getting. You came into this video thinking loneliness was a feeling that shows up when you are physically by yourself. It is not. It is a survival alarm, built for a species that could not afford to be cut off from the group. And it does not check your surroundings before it fires. It checks one thing only: whether you feel seen. Which means the alarm can be screaming inside a full house, inside a marriage, inside a group chat with 40 unread messages. Every one of those messages can leave the alarm exactly where it started. The fix was never about adding more people to a room. It was always about closing the gap the alarm is actually measuring. Remember the man at the party, 40 people around him, running the same threat program as the man eating alone 2 streets over. Now you know why nobody at that party could see it. The alarm does not live on his face. It lives in the 116 milliseconds before his own amygdala decides whether the room is safe. And by the time anyone notices, the alarm has already been running for years. Picture that same stick figure from the beginning, still standing in the middle of the party. Nothing about the scene has changed, except now you know what is happening inside his skull, and you cannot unknow it the next time you are standing in a room that looks exactly like his. You already know the feeling that in a room full of people, and somehow you find yourself you are the only one in it. You did not just learn that loneliness feels bad. You learned that it runs on hardware built to keep your ancestors alive on an open plane, and that hardware cannot tell a group chat from a predator. Somewhere in your own body, the same alarm may already be running on a schedule you never agreed to. If you've ever felt that alarm go off in a full room, say where, comment the place. Not the year, not the story, just the room. What would you have to change? Not in the room you're standing in, but in the 120 milliseconds before your own brain decides whether it's safe. You can like and subscribe to the channel to know something new.